It's bittersweet now that perfect crown has ended. Sadly, we won't be seeing IU and WooSeok on our screens come next weekend. However, I'm glad it's finally over and that they got their happily ever after. But then, there is a lot to be said. There was no actual conflict in the series, or should I say, none of it made sense. It all started with the Queen Dowager's father asking her to marry the Crown Prince, so she'd become the Crown Princess and later the Queen. However, YiRang already had her eyes on LeeWan, the suppressed second prince of the royal family. I'll use LeeWan instead of YiAn, now that we know his name. They were friends, but she'd harbor a crush on him. Bidding to her father's order, YiRang suppressed her feelings for LeeWan, and married the Crown Prince. I think LeeWan suspected her feelings for him, or that she didn't really love his brother, the Crown Prince, hence why he tried to stop him from going ahead with the marriage. It could have also been because he knew marrying YiRang meant ascending the throne, and he knew his brother wasn't up for the responsibilities that come with the throne. The Crown Prince pushed through, but couldn't handle the weight of the crown. He left most of the royal functions to his queen, YiRang, so LeeWan stepped in whenever he could. LeeWan was born for this role, but his father, for some archaic reasons, tried to break his spirit, in fear he'd ascend the throne in his weak brother's place. As the burden of the throne grew heavy, the late king decided to abdicate in favor of his capable younger brother, LeeWan. But then, the queen, who thought she'd given up a lot to get to where she was, rejects the king's edict, masking her ambition under the guise of protecting her son. Since it wasn't explained in the series, it looks like the late king committed suicide. The queen had burned his edict and walked away. It was never explained how LeeWan got the burnt edict. But the king somehow died from the fire caused by the burnt letter. I must say this doesn't make sense. I had expected to learn later that the Queen Dowager's father was somehow behind the fire that took the late king out. Who would believe he'd died from the letter's fire? Even the Queen Dowager didn't think so, hence why she suspected LeeWan all these years. But this could also be her coping mechanism, as she'd confided in her father about setting everything ablaze. Meanwhile, LeeWan no longer wanted the throne, as it had been offered on a platter of gold, discarded after a second thought, so he went with the Queen Dowager's scheme, making his afraid nephew, who had overheard his parents' conversation together with him, the king. The poor boy had to forfeit his childhood, to lead grown-ups and a country, while knowing he wasn't meant to be the king. Now, who would have thought that the Prime Minister knew all these? It's frustrating that the series didn't address his punishment. I mean, he was used to create conflict, but was ruled out as if he were just a mere bystander. What happened after his atrocity was revealed? Since Aide Choi arrived with the royal police, it is to be assumed he was arrested for his crimes. But then, it didn't make sense that his drive was his feelings for Huiju. I mean, he had been friends with LeeWan from way back when, maybe even before he knew Huiju. They might have had their bickerings, but LeeWan had always trusted him to have his back. He nurtured feelings for Huiju for many years, but didn't do anything about it. Why then did he cross over to the dark side in her name? As LeeWan said, Huiju wasn't his to begin with. She never gave any indications that she wanted anything more than friendship with him. When she realized her feelings for LeeWan, she admitted them to him. I think this had more to do with his inferiority complex and jealousy toward LeeWan. Why should he have it all? The crown and the woman he loves. Let's revisit this later. Meanwhile, The Queen Dowager, afraid that LeeWan might take the throne from her son, because of the people's respect and reverence towards him, thought to force him into marriage. In doing so, she can place an ally, someone she can control, next to him. This is also to ensure that he doesn't find the happiness that eluded her in marriage by marrying his brother. However, Huiju was the oddball she never factored in. She came blazing hot and confident. The Queen Dowager had thought to shame LeeWan by publishing their romance after she caught them in the hotel room. Little did she know she was setting herself up for failure. It worked out in Huiju's favor, as she'd been striving to win the Grand Prince over. As admitted in the last episode, LeeWan had nurtured feelings for Huiju from their school days, but had wanted her to put in more effort in winning him over. He had declined her advances, because he wanted love from her, not a business transaction. However, the Queen Dowager's article finally forced his hand. Instead of letting Huiju be ridiculed by the public because of the article, he decided to make it real. And the love story of the decade is born. Along the line, LeeWan gradually won Huiju's heart. Seeing this, and realizing Huiju could be a threat, the Queen Dowager tried to undo what she'd done, by separating them. And the conflict begins. She took her concern to her father, who decided to eliminate Huiju while the iron was still hot, before things became serious. Of course, LeeWan came to the rescue. However, things soon escalate when LeeWan, in his quest to get the Queen Dowager not to object to his marriage to Huiju, discloses that he knew of the late king's edict. The Queen Dowager discussed this with her father, while expressing less concern, as she believed he didn't have any evidence. However, her father took this to heart, fearing that his position, and that of his daughter and grandson, were tethered by a rope. This was why he tried to kill LeeWan with a drug overdose during his wedding. Fortunately, Huiju drank from the cup, instead of LeeWan. However, this mayhem disclosed Huiju's feelings for LeeWan to Jong-woo. Instead of pursuing justice, the Prime Minister decided to complete what the Queen Dowager's father didn't. I think LeeWan putting Jong-woo in his place, by asking him why Huiju didn't go to him, when he could offer her almost the same thing he could, was more of Jong-woo's drive to kill him, instead of his feelings for Huiju. I mean, had he truly loved Huiju, he would have wanted what's best for her. How did he think Huiju would feel losing her husband, whom she'd come to love? Did he think she'd go to him? Please make it make sense. This was why he colluded with the Queen Dowager's father to kill him. And when LeeWan wanted to abolish the monarchy, he objected because it would mean diminishing his control over their lives. In the end, LeeWan succeeded, and Huiju made peace with her father, realizing there was nothing to fight for. Her brother was able to trust her with his part of the company, because she trusted him with hers, when she went into the palace. This means they now have equal ground to compete for the throne. Meanwhile, it would have been good to see what LeeWan did, or will do, with his life after the abolishment of the monarchy. He seemed concerned about the price of the guitar. But then, his wife is more than able and capable of taking care of the family financially. In all, this was a good watch while it lasted. It wasn't perfect, as a lot of things were left unfinished or unexplained, but the beginning was such a fun ride. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the series? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell for all things wonderfully K-drama. Thanks for watching, bye.